Hello there, wayward stranger. Thank you for finding us once again for another weekly dose of encounters with the world of the bizarre, the unexplainable, and the paranormal. Today's video will be on the forest and park ranger encounters. The forest has had a long history of intriguing stories of disappearances, strange encounters, and cryptic mechanisms. Mysteriously, a lot of people feel a strong calling to the woods, whether just to camp or just to do nefarious deeds. Either way, these stories that I present to you tonight are interesting to say the least. Now, I do have some new updates for this channel before we get on with the show. I have some plans to make some more themes and narrations for you wonderful people. And for that, I wanted to announce that if you have any stories, any weird, unexplainable, bizarre, or even downright scary encounters that you would like me to narrate, you can send it to me on my email in the description below, or on my Instagram and send me a message there with your story on it. Okay, guys, we're gonna get on with the stories we have for you tonight. I hope you guys enjoy, and let's explore the darkness together. I told this story on Let's Not Meet, but I'm happy to tell it again. In 2016, my boyfriend, now my husband, and I went camping in eastern Pennsylvania. The place we decided to stop for the night was primitive. Camping was free, no cell service, barely a road, etc. We did encounter two other people though. They might not factor into what happened later at all, but they were creepy, so I'll describe them. The first was a woman who had her truck off the side of the road a little as we drove past. She had the hood up, and she seemed to be waiting for someone to stop and offer her to help. She had the hood open and seemed to be waiting for someone to stop and offer to help. Usually my boyfriend had no problem helping someone, but he said this time something about her put him off. She didn't really seem like she needed help, and usually people who need help look at you hopefully as you approach. She looked like she just expected that we would stop. That's what my boyfriend said anyway. I hadn't really noticed anything that strange about her. The next person came when he had chosen a spot, and were setting up a fire for hot dogs. I noticed people drive by a few times, but my boyfriend pointed out each time it was the same car, and the man in the car watched us each time as he passed. My boyfriend was a little uneasy about this, but we had been driving around for a while before finding a place we liked. It had been raining and everything was muddy, and we wanted the driest site possible. He could have been doing the same thing. We briefly thought about moving, but the road was too muddy anyway. If he wanted to find us at all he had to do was follow the tracks. There were some other tracks, but not many. He'd only have to backtrack a little to locate us again. He didn't really come by another time, so we stayed and spent the remaining several hours before dark goofing off. No one else drove by. Whether or not those two had anything to do with our experience, the real fear came later. We had gone to sleep in our tent, and sometime around 3 a.m., we were awoken by this very loud noise. I can't describe it very well, or even remember exactly what it sounded like, but my boyfriend said it reminded him of a chain gun revving up. It was also similar to how it would sound like if someone recorded a shovel being dragged over gravel and playing it over a loudspeaker, is another way of describing it. He jumped up and looked out the little window, but really couldn't see anything. The sound repeated itself another few times. I was too scared to speak, so my boyfriend whispered that it was probably miles off and I should probably go to sleep. I didn't question this, as I figured loud sounds could be easily heard miles off. After we left, he told me it sounded like it had been coming from down the road. I didn't want to freak me out. Looking back, I probably should have wondered why he would even bother to whisper if apparently the sound was far off. I was still terrified. Every little thing I heard outside sounded like someone was walking around the tent. We laid there a little while longer, when finally my boyfriend told me to get dressed because we were leaving. I got alarmed by this, and even more alarmed when he unwrapped the machete we had brought just for this trip from its plastic before opening the tent. We quickly packed up and loaded the car. I looked around for footprints that weren't our own, but despite the moon providing plenty of light, I couldn't see any. I did point out something my boyfriend hadn't noticed before we got in the car. There was a beer can by our dead fire that hadn't been there before. We didn't even bring beer. While we were driving away, my boyfriend explained that he was nervous someone might have been trying to lure us out, so we didn't think it was a good idea to run from the tent right away. He also half expected to find our gas tank being siphoned out, but that wouldn't have stopped us because we had a hybrid car. We joked that it would make a funny hybrid commercial. Number of brutal murders avoided by driving a hybrid. 2. We only joked because we were about shitting ourselves from fear and adrenaline. Even then, the rest of our trip, we only stayed in well-populated campsites or got a hotel. Not a ranger, but I lived on the outskirts of a national park in a cabin. It was a 4-mile drive from the main road just to get to the property. We had no plumbing or power. This property was right next to where the park started. To call it the middle of nowhere is an understatement. My roommate at the time was interning with the Park Service, but he's a city kid. Every evening, at the dead of night, he'd been hearing noises in the woods. What I thought was someone walking, but then they just stop in particularly overgrown areas of the jungle. So my mind started to doubt itself. Is it a pig? A cat? Is it just the wind? The cabin didn't have a locking door, and the owners didn't want me to install one, so I began sleeping in my car. Now, this is a huge property, and I parked my car over an acre away from the cabin, where I was hearing something. I started hearing those footsteps again. I moved out. My roommate, he thought I was bonkers. Stayed, and still slept there without a locking door. He got robbed, not once, but twice after I moved out. So, he finally put up motion triggering cameras. Apparently, there was a guy with a long rifle who would hike up to the property, set up in the bushes, and watch us. Not a park ranger, but I used to be in a group that's somewhat like the Scouts, so we spent a lot of time in the woods. And some weird shit happened often that most of the time it was easy to explain. One thing happened though that to this day scares the living shit out of me. I was a leader for the age group 8 to 10 year olds, and we were out on a camping trip. It was the first year we stayed on that terrain, and it was huge. Normally we tend to explore the majority of the terrain before the kids arrive, so we were aware of any possible dangerous spots to avoid. This time, it was impossible. Every camp we had we'd call a night game. It's usually a scary game in which the kids have to complete several tasks while the leader scares the ever-living shit out of them. Obviously, we've had one too many during that camp. We masked up as monsters and hid out in the woods close to the checkpoints they had to pass. While running in between checkpoints, I found an open stretch of forest with little to no foliage, so it was ideal for chasing after them. There was no real room to hide behind besides behind a tree, so I couldn't use my flashlight or they'd be able to see me from miles away. It was dark, like the unsettlingly kind of dark, plays tricks on your eyes, and you start imagining things that aren't real. During my time there, I saw a shadow that was around my size, running past me a few times. I couldn't see it very well, so I just assumed I was imagining things because nothing was there when I turned my flashlight on. The game was nearing its end, and I saw the shadow again. This time, I could see it vaguely standing near a tree, not too far away from me. I thought it was one of the other leaders hiding to scare the kids, and decided to go there as it was time for us to go back. I aimed my flashlight towards the tree while we were getting closer, and I noticed that there was indeed someone standing there, dressed up in what looked like a torn burlap sack, and had their head covered with a few white plastic bags that looked like they were tied together. I started to feel pure dread. Something felt really off. I asked if everything was okay, but they didn't respond. The only thing I heard was this weird sound that sounded like someone knocking on wood. Nevertheless, I went a bit closer until I was about 10 meters away from this person. The knocking sound turned out to be that person smacking their head repeatedly into the wood. And I noticed he looked like a male. He was barefoot and his arms and legs were covered with crusted mud. His hands were in a weird cramped position. I was convinced this was just one of the other leaders pulling a prank, so I told him to knock it off. He slowly turns his head and starts walking towards me. Something inside me just told me to run. It didn't matter if it was a stupid prank, and I just ran away, scared for nothing. If this wasn't a prank, it felt like I was in serious danger, so I ran as fast as I could. I heard him running after me, but I didn't want to turn around to look, as I'd probably run into a tree. I arrived at the campsite, and every single person that had been dressed like that was already there. They couldn't have gotten there before me. They sure as hell didn't have the time to change into regular clothes. Still, I told them that they gave me a good scare with that. They just looked at me weird, thinking I was trying to scare them, and we just left it at that. Next day I wanted to go check it out. Who knows, maybe some weirdo ate the wrong mushroom and might have been out there dying from hypothermia. I took someone else with me just in case, and there was nothing but endless trees. We arrived at the tree where I saw the person banging his head, and there was a dead, skinned, decomposing rabbit nailed to the tree. We called the cops. They looked around and quickly brushed it off as just a prank from another scouting group, or some kids from the nearby town, and just left it at that. We didn't notice anything weird after that, so it probably was just a dumb prank. But seriously, some people have a fucked up sense of humor. Edit. This has had a lot more responses than I thought. To clarify, I'm 99% sure it was just a prank by locals. The cops reacted in a way that looked more like, not this fucking bullshit again, than, oh no, evil murder in the woods, we won't stop it. I love it. Not a ranger, but an active mountain climber here in the Philippines. One time my group went on a night hike to a mountain located in central Luzon. Naturally, we took the easier trail, the North Peak, since we were hiking with some newbies. At around 4 a.m., we broke camp and started our descent. Almost 1 hour in, we noticed that we kept passing the same fallen tree and the same boulder. The trail was very straightforward. Many of us had climbed the mountain before, but for some reason, all of us were going around in a circle. One of the more superstitious hikers decided to make us all stand in a circle, utter a prayer, and leave an offering of food. Only then were we allowed to complete or descend the mountain. I have a lot more stories of creepy stuff on the mountains, so feel free to ask away. Edit. Since I saw quite a lot of people requesting for more stories, here it goes. This is around 2015 when I went on a day hike at a Mount GB, somewhere in the southern part of Luzon area. The week prior to my hike, I was in the same area with a friend. Being that the trail was relatively straightforward, we decided not to hire a guide. Fast forward to the present. I decided to do a nighttime trek with 5 of my colleagues in tow. Since I was the one who knew the trail, I was the group leader. About an hour or so, we heard something that went like, as we were hiking the trail. We looked around and thinking it might have been one of the locals, since some part of the trail led to some houses. Anyway, it soon stopped, so we forgot all about it. We soon reached a narrow part of the trail bordered by shallow cliffs on either side. Since I was lead, I was very focused on the trail. I didn't notice that my colleagues were lagging behind until one of them said, "Hey, why don't you shine your flashlight right in front of you?" I stopped walking and waited for them to catch up. When we reached the campsite, I asked my colleague why he told me to shine the flashlight right in front of me. "Well," he whispered, "you were walking so fast, I didn't think you saw the child standing right in front of you." Me and my 2 friends were walking on our way home from the summit of a Mount B, also in southern Luzon, when a kid came up to us asking if he can guide us for only 5 pesos. He was dressed with a blue checkered shirt and white pants. He was very well groomed. His clothes were wrinkle-free, and his hair wasn't even messy at all. We knew the trail by heart, so we kept on declining his offer. Eventually we agreed, since we figured he would only follow us anyway. When we started to walk again, he suddenly stopped following us. I called out to him, but he didn't mind me. He just stood there. I looked at my companions, and they were very scared. So I said, "Okay, stay there if you want, but you won't be getting your 5 pesos," and left. Now I told this story to fellow mountaineers, and they told me the kid was probably a child of one of the guides. You killed the kid, man. Fuck. This is a very popular urban legend surrounding a certain Mount C, also called the Devil's Mountain. The famous legend narrates the story of a couple who went on a hike in Mount C at midnight. They got lost when they accidentally took an unusual trail on their way to campsite. Even if the weather is threatening because of a storm and there's zero visibility, they still continued their hike. They arrived in a place where the trail forked, and they turned left when they should have turned right. The left was a deadly trail, thus they never made it to the campsite. According to local folks, the two were never found until now. This story is connected to the previous one, also taking place in Mount C. A group of hikers, together with a guide, went on a rarely used trail. On the way, they passed by a small village, where the elders advised them to continue the trek, but leave the only girl in the group at the village. They politely declined and continued hiking. Halfway through, the guide told them that they could only go as far as the first half. Being experienced hikers, they paid the guide and continued until they came to a fork in the road. As they were debating which road to take, a couple stumbled upon them and told them to take the left side. They continued following the couple even though it got dark and started to rain. Suddenly, their flashlights turned off simultaneously, but they still tried to follow the couple, and one of the group members slipped and almost fell from a ravine. I have so many of these, but I'll share my favorite. I've been a ranger in the U.S. Forest Service for almost 15 years, but this takes place around 3 years after I joined. We were getting calls about a lone wolf with a collar on, hanging around campsites. Weird, since wolves aren't known to be in the area. But when you work in the field long enough, you start to realize anything is possible. No calls had mentioned violent behavior from the animal. Thank God. I departed from the station around noon to check out the place where it had been sighted. Wandered around for around 3 hours, no further calls around that time, until I took a break for water. Sat down, had a snack, drank some water, and was even getting ready to leave again when the thing was about 20 feet out, trotting near the tree line. It seemed friendly and had a collar, so I whistled at it, and he came right over to me. Getting a little closer look, I could see it wasn't a wolf. It was huge, but it was dark and it didn't really have the right body structure, though I could see why it'd be confusing from a distance. I radioed in and reported that I had the dog with me, but as soon as I said I'd bring it in, the dog fucking took off, like he was playing to see how far he could get me to chase him. Typical dog behavior. I went about it, and I swear it was a game of chase for like 15 minutes at least, as we steadily ran through the forest. Please don't go running through the forest unless you know the area like the back of your hand. The dog finally slowed down near a rock bed / creek area and started pacing around a spot. I drew closer and didn't really see anything off at first. Then I noticed it. The overgrowth had almost disguised what appeared to be bones. I called it in immediately, and another team was sent to recover the remains. When I went to retrieve the dog, he was just gone. But honestly, it wasn't a priority at that time. He was friendly enough, and I figured we'd catch up with him later. Bones were identified as a teenage male's. Died by a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head. He'd been reported missing in the area long before he became a ranger, and there'd be pretty much no hope in finding him. I spoke to his mom on the phone, and she called to thank me personally, and she asked how I found her son. I mentioned the black dog, then thought I'd say something wrong since there was a pause on her side of the line. After a couple details about the dog, she quietly explained that her son, who was struggling with making connections, had sunken deep into a deep depression after the death of his best friend, the very dog that led me to him. I think I spent the rest of the day stunned. I continued to be in disbelief in a way, but I know what happened. Also, throwaway account, because my main would give away who the individual was in this post and where it took place. The family's still grieving for their son. I have a friend who was a trail ranger, basically a ranger who couldn't get you in trouble. He told me about his time he was gathering illegally placed wildlife cameras and knocking down hunting stands, feeders, and blinds with another actual ranger. The other ranger wasn't feeling so well, so he said he was going to go head back as it's an hour ATV ride. Friend finished up the last one when he heard voices. Keep in mind, he's far off the beaten path. He called out and no one replied. As it gets dark, he started to head back and found that his ATV wouldn't start. He then noticed that the battery was not connected anymore. He reconnected it and started to drive, but it wasn't going fast at all. Less than a half an hour later, the whole thing died. He radioed back basically saying, "Hey guys, I need someone to come pick me up." They told him that they would be there in about an hour. He asked if the other guy got back, and they said no. He settled down and started a small fire, but before long he heard voices again. It's dark. He's not happy. The voices sound like an argument now. Someone was angry and yelling at someone who sounded more scared. He called out and asked if anyone needed help. The voices didn't really seem to care. He guessed that they had to be less than 1,000 feet away. He radioed again and they said that they were having trouble finding the path he might have been on and hadn't left yet. He asked them just to get to the other ranger to tell them where they were before because he left with the iPad that had the map on it. They said he still wasn't back. About 3 more minutes go by and he hears the voices start up again. He decides to walk to them, hoping maybe that they would stop being drunk assholes and maybe have a map. He walked in the direction, but the voices seemed to be getting further as he got closer. Finally, after 20 minutes, he gave up and walked back. He got a radio call. They said that the other guy was found passed out, covered in vomit, and was being taken to the hospital, but he crossed off everywhere they found like stands, so they have a general idea where he was. Then the radio died, and the voices came back. Bored out of his mind, he decided to listen to what they were arguing about, picking up things like, "Well, you knew it wasn't yours to take. I don't fucking care. You know better," and so on. His guess was 2 hunters arguing over a kill. Then he heard one shout something unintelligible and silence. Then a gunshot. He doused in fire and hid. After that he heard nothing. Just his breathing for the next half an hour until he saw ATV lights. He told the guy picking him up everything and they called back. They had people looking for 3 hours and found nothing. They came back the next day with police and dogs. After about an hour, a shallow grave was found, and in it was a long dead man who had been clearly shot in the face. Thing was, it was a skeleton who had been there for years. So, either the argument he had heard just ended with a bang and 2 parties went home last night, or he heard the murder of someone from years ago. Not a ranger, but when we were about 14, my friends and I went up to stay at our buddy's family farm in rural New Hampshire. Not much there besides farmland and miles of deep woods. It was around midnight and we just spent a few hours fucking around, smoking cigars and building a bonfire in one of the cow pastures. To get back to the house from the pasture, you needed to walk about half a mile through the woods and across another field. And the kid's dad had a tradition of messing with us on our way back. The usual routine was waiting on the porch and shooting Roman candles at us as we crossed the field. We started walking back, and as we emerged from the path, we started hearing loud rustling noises in the tree along the edge of the field, about 70 yards away. We all ran into the middle of the field and hit the deck smiling, thinking my buddy's dad was about to shoot fireworks at us. About 5 minutes of the intermittent leaf rustling and no Roman candles, our smiles were gone. We started debating if it was a black bear or some other big animal. The rustling was distinctly the sound of footsteps. It would pick up and suddenly stop as if someone was running tree to tree. Thoroughly freaked out, my buddy pulls out his cell phone and calls a landline at his house. He stands up and walks a little in the direction of the house while my other friend and I stay laying down, staring in the direction of the noises. Suddenly something runs out of the tree line. I will never forget this image as long as I live. We were about 50 yards away, and we were only 50 yards away, and there was only a crescent moon out, so there wasn't much light to make out fine details. But we watched as this inhumanely tall thing strode across a portion of the field and then back into the trees. It was skinny with disproportionately long limbs, and in the dark appeared to be a solid light gray/white color. As it ran, its incredibly long arms and legs swung in this disturbingly unusual way, and it appeared to be moving much faster than it should have been. As fast as it appeared, it had gone back into the forest. My friend and I looked at each other in silent horror. We stood up, ready to book it back to the house. My other friend walks back over to us, oblivious to what we just saw. His dad picked up and he said he'd been in bed for an hour. Without saying anything, me and my friend who witnessed it started sprinting for our lives back to the house. The other friend followed suit. We made it back, locked all the doors, and recount what we saw to the other friend and his dad. None of us slept that night. When we went downstairs in the morning, my friend's dad, whose bedroom is on the ground floor, tells us how throughout the night he heard something banging on the side of the house and windows, and claimed he went out several times with his shotgun to find nothing. We thought he was just fucking with us at the time, but to this day, he stands by that story. As someone who doesn't believe in the paranormal, it's not a story I tell often, but the two friends who were there and I still talk about it regularly, and it scares the shit out of us every time. Just this year, I shared about it with another buddy of mine who loved that type of stuff, and after a quick Google search, he shows me this link along with a few others, scrolls down to Wood Devil. Little side note, the link will be in the description. When I saw it, I nearly shit my pants. Description and depiction of this creature from local folklore matched what I saw perfectly. I honestly don't know what to believe, but I know what I saw, and it's safe to say you're never going to catch me in the New Hampshire woods past sunset again. Bonus creepiness: the stretch of forest adjacent to his family's farm has been known locally as Bones Wood or Devil's Wood for as long as his family has lived in the area, which is several generations. Hello everyone, I hope you enjoyed today's stories as much as I did recording them. I had so much fun with a lot of these stories were very strange. Even that last one with the New Hampshire one. I had a friend who goes to school in New Hampshire, and right now he just can't stop thinking about how he doesn't really want to see the Wood Devil, if you will. It's so funny, but I hope you enjoy. Please like and subscribe if you like it, and have a good night.